Hello, Auburn. It has been another busy week, a very emotional week. I'm sure if you have been watching the news, you have seen what's been going on out in this world and all of the voices that are wanting to be heard. And it is our responsibility to ensure that those voices are heard and that actions are taken. To that regard, I want to give you a little bit of background of what we have been doing in Auburn over the past 2 years as far as racial equity and implicit bias. Back in 2018, I asked our HR team to start looking for and vetting candidates to be consultants for us, to provide training opportunities for not just the leadership team, but all of our employees within the city of Auburn. We identified in 2019, in early 2019, from a company called Racing to Equity that is owned by Bernardo Ruiz. In January through April of last year, we conducted meetings with our staff and with myself. We had a contract with council. Council approved that contract back in July of 2019, and in August we kicked off Inclusive Auburn as a start to that program. Beginning in September of 2019, the directors and I began our journey of 6 8-hour training days with Bernardo as well as some of his peers, including Dr. Pond. We went through the history of racism, and then we started to learn about some of the history that we weren't even aware of. Right? We know that there has been systemic racism in our country, in our world, for quite some time, for centuries. But until you get to see all of it and the history that perhaps wasn't taught in our school history classes, it becomes eye-opening. It causes you to want to act and be better. And so during those training sessions, the directors and I became even more dedicated to the work that needs to be done, not just within our own team here at City of Auburn for the employees, but also for our entire community. And that engagement in the community was scheduled to start just about the same time that COVID-19 hit. So unfortunately, some of that interaction within the community has yet to begin. But that doesn't mean that we are not going to do it. It doesn't mean that we have been derailed. It simply means that it's been put on hold a little bit so we can have some of those face-to-face interactions that we are going to need. We need to hear from you in the community. We will be doing outreach. There will be surveys, but it's not just that, and this is not just lip service. We intend to be better for everyone in this community. All of our council members are going to be going through training as well, training for leaders and how they can best support diversity, be anti-racist, and be supportive of everyone in our community so that equity exists. It's not enough to be equal. Equity has to be the foundation, and we are committed to this in Auburn. We held a town hall this week, an electronic or virtual town hall for our Team Auburn employees. I want to read you a little bit of the email that I sent, the letter that I sent to the employees prior to this town hall meeting. It says, "Dear Team Auburn, the past 2 weeks have been a difficult time for us all as the death of George Floyd has revealed once again the deeply ingrained systems of racism that continue to plague our country. The protests and outrage that have followed are reflective not only of persistent injustices faced by men and women of color, but also of the trauma that exists in our communities from historic and continued inequity. Our witness to George Floyd's death has ignited a broad and important movement that seeks to end the long history of racial violence in our country. It has been a catalyst for a worldwide movement and affirmation that Black lives matter, including and especially here in Auburn. As your mayor, I want you to know that I am listening and I stand with you and our residents in creating lasting and meaningful change for our communities of color. I don't have all the answers, but what I do know is that lasting change takes commitment. Long after the news cycles have turned to other coverage, the responsibility to keep this conversation alive will rest with each one of us. We must strive to do better and continue to find ways to be intentional in educating ourselves about privilege, unconscious bias, and institutional racism. We must become better listeners and cultivate crucial conversations amongst ourselves and in our community. Words alone cannot create change. We must show up. And one of the important parts of that is that we need to listen to understand and not listen to respond. In that regard, I started having meetings with members of our community this week, including one of the protest organizers from last week's peaceful protest, from pastors within our community, and even today I met with the Police Officers Guild, because this is not a one-sided story. We need to have everyone involved in order to make sure that changes that take place in our community are from members of our community. I have no control, I have no span of control, no authority over what happens in cities outside of Auburn, nor do I want that. But what I do want is to make sure that we are listening to the voices of Auburn. The rest of it we're going to hear on the news, but those meaningful conversations that we're going to have are from those of us here in Auburn who love our city, bumps and bruises and all of the good, all of the bad. We will come together to make Auburn an even better city than it currently is. I do need your help on this, so I hope when the call comes, you are ready to respond and you are willing to be part of the solution. It's easy to stand on the sidelines and point fingers and listen to that national voice and lump Auburn in with all of that. Again, we have our bumps and bruises, but I want to focus on how we make Auburn better. So I hope I can count on you to be with me.